Welcome to Acadia After Dark. I'm your host, Reverend Redbeard. Tonight, we're exploring the legend of the Specter Moose, Maine's most enigmatic cryptid. This ghostly giant has captivated the imaginations of locals and cryptozoologists alike for over a century. So grab your lantern and let's explore the legend of the Specter Moose. This quote is taken from a magazine printed in North Dakota in around the year 1900. The enormous moose that has been the wonder of sportsmen in northern Maine since 1891 has again been seen. Every story that comes from the North Woods concerning this moose makes him a little bigger than before. It is generally believed that no moose ever killed in Maine, or so far as is known anywhere else, has approached in stature or weight, much less in spread of antlers, the Specter Moose of Lobster Lake. The legend of the Specter Moose began in 1891 with the first reported sighting by Clarence Duffy of Old Town, who was a hunting guide near Lobster Lake. Duffy described the moose as a ghostly white moose with immense antlers. He was so terrified that he fled without taking a shot. His story was initially met with skepticism, and he was laughed at much to his dismay, but it marked the beginning of the Specter Moose's legend. A few months later, a lumberman from Bangor named John Ross, who was also at Lobster Lake, saw the giant white moose, and with this second sighting, some people began to believe. These tall tales were still largely discounted until a New York City sportsman, Howard Van Ness, had an encounter with the beast in the year 1892. He reportedly was separated from his hunting companions when he spotted and shot at the moose, which he described as weighed a ton and as tall as a camel, with a magnificent head and antler. After his shot hit the animal in the shoulder, it let out a loud bellow and charged at Van Ness, who took shelter under a pile of fallen trees and brush. The moose circled the area at tremendous speed and jumped over the hunter's hiding spot before giving up and leaving. After this, many hunters began to flock to the northern Maine woods to try and find this elusive and mighty beast for themselves. In 1899, Massachusetts hunter Gilman Brown had a close encounter with the Specter Moose. He counted 22 points on one side of its antlers and fired 5 shots at the creature, but it only glared at him and walked away. Brown later said that he felt like he had seen a ghost. The legend continued to grow with more sightings over the years. In 1901, a man was attacked by a large gray animal while fishing in the woods. This incident added to the growing number of encounters with the mysterious creature. It was after this that some of the sightings took on a more supernatural tone. In 1910, a woman reported seeing a large gray animal with a light glowing between its antlers. This sighting added a supernatural element to the legend, with some believing the light was a sign of the moose's ghostly nature. In 1925, a group of loggers claimed to have seen the Specter Moose near a remote logging camp in northern Maine. They described it as a massive, ghostly figure that appeared suddenly and vanished just as quickly. In 1938, a New York Times article reported that the Specter Moose had reappeared in Maine, citing several new sightings by local residents. This brought renewed interest in the cryptid on a national scale and sparked debates about its existence. In 1950, a hunter named John Smith claimed to have encountered the Specter Moose while hunting in the woods. He described it as a towering white moose with enormous antlers. He fired several shots at the creature, but it seemed to disappear into the forest without a trace. In 1978, a hiker named Sarah Johnson reported seeing the Specter Moose while hiking in the Maine woods. She described it as a large gray animal with a ghostly glow around it. She was so frightened that she quickly left the area. One of the most chilling encounters tells of a group of hunters near the Molunkus Stream in east central Maine. it killed a large white moose. Afterwards, they slit its throat and hung it from a tree overnight so they could dress it out in the morning. In the morning, they awoke to find the moose had vanished. The hunters searched the area and were unable to find any trace of the animal's carcass aside from the trace of blood on the ground where they had hung it the night before. That evening, the vanished moose reappeared, simply walking into the hunters' camp with its throat still cut and bleeding. The hunters began to try and shoot the animal, but this time the beast was unfazed and walked away. Apparently the moose was later seen in Ashland, some 90 miles away, at which time it was shot again with no effect. Still, more modern stories of the Specter Moose depict it as a sort of omen of misfortune, making an appearance when something bad is about to happen in a community. This was reportedly the case in 2002 when a giant white moose was spotted in Franklin shortly before the town's restaurant was burned down. Theories about the Specter Moose range from it being a rare albino or leucistic moose, a hybrid between a moose and an elk, or even a supernatural being, a guardian, or sort of protector of the forest. The Specter Moose is reported as being anywhere from 10 to 15 feet tall and weighing as much as 2,500 pounds. For comparison, a normal moose at the time would have weighed around 8 to 900 pounds and stood around 6 feet tall. So it would be unlikely for an experienced hunter to misidentify one, even in the most exaggerated stories around the campfire. One other common theory is that it is a moose that has an infestation of winter ticks. It causes the lightening of the animal's coat. However, some would note that this usually causes the animal to rub off most of their hair as a result, and infested animals are typically seen as skinny or emaciated, which the Specter Moose is definitely not. Though albino moose are rare, they do exist. There's even an area in Ontario, Canada, called White Moose Forest due to the uncommon number of sightings of white moose, which are called spirit moose by some of the locals. However, a common trait of albinism in animals is a pink or red coloring of the eyes, while most accounts of the spirit moose say it has brown. In 2019, author Al Mishu published a book entitled Hunting Old Moxie, the largely true history of the Specter Moose of Lobster Lake, Maine. Mishu gathers stories from his great-uncle and other sources, detailing multiple encounters with the Specter Moose over the years. He also found newspaper articles from the early 20th century that reported sightings and speculated on the creature's supernatural qualities. In 2021, an author by the name of Christopher Packard wrote of the Specter Moose in his book, Mythical Creatures of Maine. Here is what he said. After reading Duffy's account of the great white moose, Sam and I decided to head up to the Lobster Lake to see if we could bag the fellow. We did see some unusually large tracks, but unfortunately, no giant white moose's head will be hanging on the lake house wall. Burt Marlborough Packard, 1892. Whether real or imagined, the Specter Moose has left an indelible mark on Maine's cultural landscape. It's more than just a local legend. It's become a symbol of the state's wild spirit and a testament to the enduring power of a good story. I think that's pretty cool. Hopefully you do too. That's all for tonight's episode of Acadia After Dark. I'm your host, the Reverend Redbeard. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, next time you're out in the Maine woods, keep an eye out for the ghostly giant. You never know what you might find.